I'm really pleased to address this World Bank Group roundtable on a topic that is critical to the economic and social future of Sri Lanka, as well as a really important factor in ensuring gender equality and gender justice in our society. Childcare as an enabler of women's increased economic participation. I thank the World Bank Group for the opportunity to deliver this keynote. This is an issue of strategic importance for Sri Lanka's recovery, long-term growth, and for ensuring equality. In Sri Lanka, as in many other countries, women form a significant part of the population and contribute meaningfully to our economy and our society. Yet, their full potential remains unvalued or undervalued and unrecognized due to inadequate access to affordable, quality childcare services and other support for carrying out the unpaid care work burden that women are often forced to carry. Today's discussion highlights how childcare, often overlooked in economic policy, can be a key lever to promote gender equality, reduce poverty, and support sustainable growth. It is about recognizing reproductive work as not just an individual responsibility or the responsibility of an individual, but as a social and economic necessity. Reproductive work happens whether we recognize it or not, and we often do not count this in our analysis of how the economy functions and how society is maintained and reproduced over time. And ignoring this factor or understanding or placing this primarily as the responsibility or as a private responsibility managed by women and households, in my view, really distorts the way we look at how the economy functions and what is necessary for society to function effectively. Women are central to the economy. Both their paid and unpaid work is essential towards maintaining the economy. However, barriers continue to restrict their workforce participation in the formal workforce. While it is true that women's labor force participation in Sri Lanka, with statistics which gets repeated quite often, stands at only 32%, which is significantly lower than men's participation at 74%, this statistic, in my view, fails to capture the full scope of women's economic contributions. This figure focuses solely on formal paid labor, which does not account for the vast amount of unpaid work women perform. Women in Sri Lanka spend an average of 6 hours a day on unpaid domestic labor, including childcare, cleaning, cooking, and elder care, according to the Department of Census and Statistics 2022. The number of hours increases quite significantly if there is if there's a member of the family who's unwell or if there's a member of the family who's disabled. This invisible labor, which is crucial to the functioning of households and society, is not valued within traditional economic metrics like the GDP. Research by the Institute of Policy Studies of Sri Lanka shows that closing the gender gap in employment could increase GDP by almost 6%. But the lack of accessible childcare, one of the components of this whole gamut of unpaid care work, remains as a fundamental reason for this gap to be maintained and perpetuated. Around the world, evidence shows that when childcare is available and affordable, women are more likely to join and remain in the workforce, improve productivity and national growth. Recognizing childcare and the domestic work or childcare responsibilities a woman does, and including that in our planning, also enables women to enter and leave the workforce without being penalized for it. Women who have to take time out, and that's also a choice that women should be allowed to have, that they take time out to raise their children. That shouldn't be seen as as some kind of impossible choice that women are forced to make, but something that is part of what it means to be a member of society and what it takes to raise a child. And you shouldn't be penalized for it, but we know that happens. We know that even today, when young women are interviewed for jobs, they are asked about their plans for marriage and their plans for childbearing, and that even if this is not explicitly asked, this is in the mind of the interviewer when selecting particularly young women for jobs. Recognizing the contribution of unpaid care work to our GDP, we acknowledge its crucial role in both our economy and society, but more importantly, we begin to start organizing our economy and our services in a different way if we take this into account. Investing in childcare benefits not only women, but families and the broader economy. It supports children's development, contributes to economic security, and helps shift gender norms that limit women's opportunities. We must also recognize that by providing these support services, we are also recognizing the enormous amount of unpaid care work that not just the mother provides, but grandmothers, aunts, sisters, neighbors. It really does take a village to raise a child in this day and age. And there's a whole gamut, there's a whole range of people who have to support a woman who's in the workforce. And those women who have access to that network, well and good. And those who don't, like the story mentioned by you in your opening remarks, then what choices do those women have? Those of us who are privileged enough will pay for that work to be done by someone else. And usually those domestic care workers who are paid to do this work represent some of the most vulnerable workers in our community. No regulation, long work hours, poor wages, and that whole oppression that happens among domestic workers as well. This is all part of the same issue. So closing the gender gap could increase Sri Lanka's GDP by up to 20%. This is not just a social goal, or I should say it's not just an economic goal, but it's a broader goal that strengthens family well-being and national development. Sri Lanka has faced many economic challenges, especially following the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic crisis. But we know, and there's data to prove this, that these crises hit women particularly hard. Sectors like tourism, hospitality, and informal work, where many women are employed, have seen job losses and reduced income. Initiatives that were set in place to deal with these crises, like working from home, flexible working hours, affected women differently. I think all of us understand as women what it's like to work from home. We are working from home all the time anyway. We now just have an added responsibility of working for our job from home as well. Right? And think about how this affects women who may not have the infrastructure to support those kinds of work from home facilities or flexible work hours. How women from the informal sector can afford themselves of these privileges, or even a woman working in the apparel industry. Right? So the flexibility that is offered through technology or these kinds of arrangements benefit a very selected group of women, and we need to think about the fact that women are also not a homogeneous group, that there's a huge diversity within women and how they're able to access these arrangements. Women were more likely to lose their jobs as a result of all of this during the pandemic, and many have not re-entered the workforce. We also know that women's mental health, Children's mental health suffered significantly during the pandemic and as well as the economic crisis. Addressing this requires interventions that understand the reality of all women's lives and include services that support women's unpaid care work as a core economic policy tool, as well as acknowledgement of women's rights and women's position in society. Research and global experience show that gender equal policies, economic policies, social policies perform better. Investing in care infrastructure and support services can accelerate recovery and promote inclusive growth. One practical approach, and that is what we are talking about today, though I want to stress that childcare support is not the be-all and end-all of supporting women's labor force, women's work, or recognizing women's paid and unpaid care work, is employer-supported childcare. Some Sri Lankan companies are already adopting these models. For example, Dialogue has introduced in-house childcare facilities and flexible work arrangements for parents, and I think also Keels. Globally, such models are well established. In Sweden, public-private partnerships support subsidized childcare, allowing both parents to remain active in the workforce. In the US, companies like Google and Microsoft have invested in on-site childcare, but we also know that the US has some of the worst childcare policies and maternal and paternal health benefits, so I'm not sure these are the best examples. But where these initiatives are available, there's evidence to show that it improves employee retention and productivity. Such models can play a vital role in expanding women's workforce participation and creating inclusive workplaces. The Sri Lankan government has taken steps such as early childhood development programs through the Ministry of Women and Child Affairs to expand childcare services. However, these efforts must be scaled up. Policy options include tax incentives for businesses offering childcare, subsidies for working families, and a national childcare framework to ensure consistent quality. Public-private partnerships are also critical to expand service provision. We also want to include, here we think that early childhood development programs are critical in this whole initiative. Currently, it's mostly located in the informal sector and isn't seen as part of the education pathway. Affordable childcare, but also our dream would be to see schools including this as part of how a school is set up, including things like after-school care, holiday programs for children, thus making it possible for a parent to feel that their child is being taken care of while they're at work, and whatever that work might entail. Lessons from countries like Norway and Finland, which offer paid parental leave and subsidized care, can inform Sri Lanka's approach. Integrating childcare into broader economic and gender equality strategies will be key. Childcare, we must also remember, is not solely a women's issue either. It is an economic and policy issue for sure. It is also an issue about gender and gender equality. Redistribution of unpaid care work must also be part of our overall strategy. We need to understand that currently women are seen as primarily responsible for care work, for child care work, but we need to start understanding that the reproductive work that goes into maintaining our societies and our families are also the responsibilities of men and of societies. Because this is the work that sustains us, and then all of us have a responsibility towards this, and not just women. While the World Bank's support is essential, progress will require coordinated action by the government, the private sector, and civil society. And I would also urge all of you to look upon this issue as not just something that has to be part of our economic strategy, that this is how to make our economy more sustainable, but this is an issue of justice and of equality. That's why all of us have a stake in this. This roundtable offers an opportunity to make meaningful progress towards accessible and quality childcare in Sri Lanka. Let us work together to ensure that all women have the conditions they need to fully participate in and contribute to our shared future. Thank you very much.